Welcome on board the Rich Planet Starship, broadcasting from somewhere high above the Earth. I'm Richard D. Hall. This week's guest is an author and researcher. His book, The Lost Age of High Knowledge, contends that prior to recorded history existed a global civilization more scientifically, technically and spiritually advanced than our own. Not only that, the technological secrets of this civilization are known about by sections of the global intelligence network and are being used by them in secret today. In his book, Keith sheds light on what this high knowledge may have been, and the claims are very wide-ranging. Welcome on board the Starship, Keith Hunter.
Hello, it's good to be here.
It's great to have you on board, Keith. Now, just to start with a little bit of your educational background, because the book it's slightly scientific in that there are equations in there. You cite some of Kepler's work, Kepler's laws and this kind of thing. But you didn't do a science degree, did you? Tell me what your degree was in.
My degree was in psychology and sociology. It was from University of Leeds. So it wasn't essentially a pure science degree. The science that we did do, obviously, in those subjects is experiments based on statistics and so forth. So it is very scientific, but not necessarily in the hard sciences. But when I finished that, in terms of the academic training, research skills, I basically went over to different areas that interested me, and I got some inspiration from some books from 1998 onwards that I purchased, such as the works of Maurice Cotterell, The Mayan Prophecies, Fingerprints of the Gods from Graham Hancock. I also bought, though, some books from Nexus magazine by the author Bruce Cathy, and he was a real inspiration. And most of the work that I've actually done has built upon his studies in his books. I was really concerned with looking at things from a mythological standpoint, which I quickly realised, as many authors have, that the ancient myths that we have, say the Greek gods and so forth, or Egyptian myths, they have an astronomical or even a physics base to them. And so it became apparent that I had to move on from just looking at the myths and the interpretations almost from a psychological or archetypal sense to looking at them in terms of astronomy. So I had to essentially self-educate on subjects that I hadn't at that point really got any real knowledge of.
And you use a lot of, well, I would call it arithmetic, to look at things like feet and inches in the imperial system and compare that to certain dimensions of the equator and that kind of thing. We'll come on to that. But I just want to read a section from your website. It says that the ancient world, prior to recorded history, was once more advanced scientifically, technically and spiritually than the global civilization of the present world age, and indeed that this fact has been willfully kept from the masses for millennia. Now, a lot of people like Hancock and others cite, that you've got the pyramids and various megalithic structures which seem to be too difficult for ancient primitive people to have built. Yeah. So can you give us a broad picture of why you think there was an advanced civilization which presumably somehow was wiped out?
Well, I think that there are structures like these massive megalithic structures like Stonehenge or the Great Pyramid. If you look very carefully at them and you evaluate them in the right sort of way, and you're open-minded in terms of looking at the past, and you're not caught up with this axiomatic assumption that everything that came before must be inferior to what's come afterwards. If you look at these structures and evaluate them, especially mathematically, especially with regard to, say, the dimensions of the Earth as we know them today, to our accurate standards, you can see that they must have had the same standards, and therefore they must have had a model of the Earth comparable to the best one we have today. And the placement of these structures globally, it's suggestive that they were tapping into certain energetic influences that physicists today would be familiar with, like processes like resonance and so forth, to tap into to energy in the form of coupled oscillators or these kinds of systems.
Yes. All right. Well, let's just talk about the theory that at one time the Earth had a year which consisted of just 360 days, right? Now, I think conventional science would say that that was never the case, but apparently there is evidence in the ancient Egyptian calendar and other calendars. They say that there was 360 days in a year. Am I right?
Yes.
So can you expand on that for us, Keith?
Yeah, the Egyptian calendar in particular, from ancient times, they had a combination of a 360-day year with a 30-day month, and they held that these two values were very fixed and precise at those values. There is an ancient Egyptian myth that does concern itself with a change to not just the Earth but also to the Moon, and it concerns the addition of 5 extra days. And it's basically one of these stories which it's based upon gods and goddesses, if you will.
Yes.
Which are actually associated with either celestial bodies or powers of nature. And this is where you get the mythical stories, which are not taken seriously as they should be by academia today, because these stories is like a dilution of knowledge which was once scientifically held and no doubt could be backed up scientifically to a standard that physicists today might respect, but they don't respect these stories as they are. Now,
there is one thing that I think science does admit, and that is that if you have a circle and you split that up into degrees, you have 360 degrees in a circle. And it is an accepted fact, I believe, that where that came from, the degree system having 360 in a circle, that came from the fact that the ancients once thought there were 360 days in a year. That's why we split it up, a circle, into 360 and not 400 or 600 or any other number. It was because the ancients thought there were 360 days in the year. Is that correct?
That's exactly correct.
So a modern day scientist would say, yes, but they were wrong. It's always been 365 and a quarter.
Yes, they would.
That's what they would say.
Yes.
But you think there was at some time, and I don't think you know exactly when that time was, that there was a 360-day year.
Oh, yes. And at the same time, I believe also the moon had 30 days per month, just in line with the ancient Egyptian calendar.
Right. And this would make everything extremely harmonious in terms of, you'd have 30 divides exactly into 360.
Yeah, 12 times.
So you'd have 12 months, well, you have 30 days, I guess, and then your moon cycle will be in sync as well. Mm-hmm. Now, I find it fascinating how you actually come to the conclusion that this is the case. And can you share that with us, Keith?
Yeah, it's actually based upon studying our measure systems as we have them right now. And I mean imperial measures, specifically feet, fathoms, fathom is 6 feet, or inches. And basically, I looked to see, as part of my investigations, and this again followed on from the work of Bruce Cathy, and because he was concerned with measures, and is there an ideal set of measures, in some universal sense even? And I looked to see if there was anything decisive that could validate, even energetically, imperial measures as we use them, as a nested set of cycles. And so I looked first of all at the idea of a 360-day Earth year. And I examined various studies. There were some based on eclipses and some carried out for the past 400 years or so. And they've looked at, first of all, the Earth's axial rotation. And we have 24 hours to one rotation of the Earth with respect to the Sun. It's a pretty stable, consistent value if you do a whole year calculation on that. And our studies have shown that although there are slight fractional adjustments to this, sometimes it goes slightly less than 24 hours. It also goes slightly more than 24 hours. And so, at least based on eclipse studies from, I think they date back to 2,000 years BC, from some of those records, we can be pretty confident that the Earth's orbital period, the Earth's rotation on its axis has remained pretty much constant at 24 hours. So when I say that the Earth has increased its number of days per year, I mean just that. It was 360 days of 24 hours, and it's increased to what is 365.24218 days also of 24 hours.
Right.
Now, if that's a real change, and 360 is considered like an ideal year, I thought, well, maybe the Earth's size is different. Maybe there was an ideal circumference. And then I started to apply imperial measures of feet to the circumference of the Earth.
Just to interrupt you there, Keith, because imperial measures go back eons, and I guess no one really knows when they were first originated. This is the inch, the foot, is it the fathom? I mean, do people know?
Well, I think, if my memory serves me correctly, some of the explanations given for how we came up with the measurements were based upon the human form. I believe a monarch or whatever's...
and an inch is it was a part of your thumb. And,
so you got things like that.
Well, an actual foot is a foot.
And even in Egyptian reliefs, they have some people in profile like so, and that's an arm span. And a fathom is usually referred to as an arm span.
Right.
So there was that. I mean, even think about Leonardo's image with
Okay.
But when I looked at them, I was wondering if there was a really exacting standard for this. So I took what we consider today, what our values are today of what the length of, say, a foot is. Mm-hmm. I looked in particular at the fathom unit, which is 6 feet. And I said, what is the circumference of the Earth at the equator in terms of fathoms? And the value that you can get from that, it's about it's 21,914,112 fathoms, which it's about approximately 24,902 statute miles, which is what most people are familiar with. But if you express that in fathoms, right, and you get that numeric sequence 219141112, and you just look at that, if you look at the ratio of change between the Earth's tropical year that takes it from 360 to its present value, right? And you basically use that ratio to reduce the equatorial circumference in fathoms. You reduce it almost exactly to the same numeric sequence that we see associated with minutes of Act 216.
Right, so let me just re-explain that to you. You think that there was 360 days in the year at one time.
Yes.
There's now 365 and a quarter. If you divide 365 and a quarter, 360 into 365 and a quarter, you get a ratio, which is the amount by which the year has lengthened.
Yeah.
Use that ratio. That's the change.
Yeah.
You're multiplying that by the circumference of the Earth, and you get this extremely round number. Is that what?
Yes. The accuracy
it's almost a
level
perfectly round number if you use that ratio to multiply.
Yeah, so essentially what I'm saying is the Earth has increased from 360 days to its current value of 365.24218. That's a very accurate value we've got. And if you do the division sum of the present tropical year divided by the 360 ideal, you'll get a value which will be something like 1.01456 as a ratio. Now, if you take what is the equatorial circumference of the Earth right now, expressed in fathoms, and you take that value, which is 219141112, that sequence, yeah? If you take that and divide it by the ratio of change that we've just got between the Earth's present year and the ideal, you reduce the circumference of the Earth, and you reduce it back to a numeric sequence, which is also in line with the value we use for minutes of arc, so it'll be 216,000,000. If you took 360 and multiplied that by 60,000, then you get the circumference of the Earth in fathoms. But if you do divide it by 1,000, you basically get the number 21,600, which is the ideal circumference of the Earth at the equator, in units of precisely 6,000 feet, which is what I term an ideal geographical map.
So you think it's too much of a coincidence for that, but if you multiply by that ratio, for it to be this exact figure of the circumference of the Earth?
The accuracy is extreme, because essentially what we're doing is we're reducing the equatorial circumference of the Earth by about 357 miles. And we are slightly off this exact value of about 21,600 units of 6,000 feet. We're slightly off by about 2,300 feet. So it's a reduction, about 357 miles, and you're within half a mile.
So what you're saying is, at some point in time, when we had the 360-day year, the Earth was, the diameter of this equator was 357 miles less, smaller.
Yeah, the circumference of the equator.
And in the same
smaller.
ratio. So
by exactly the same ratio on principle.
And if you do reduce it by that amount, all of our imperial measures seem to fit into it
Yes,
perfectly.
they seem to be harmonious. Yes.
Now, here's the question then, Keith. If you are interested in the UFO subject, which everybody should be, then the place to go is the Leeds 2011 Exopolitics Conference. Now that takes place at Leeds University on the 5th, 6th and 7th of August, where myself and many others will be speaking, some of whom have been on this show. richplanet.net is sponsoring the conference, so why not make a weekend of it and get yourself along.